Greetings, everyone. I'm Yarlik, and I'm very excited to be bringing to you today Hollow Knight Silksong. The game is real, and we now have a tool-assisted speedrun for it. So this is in the category of any percent, which means that we're going to complete just the basic ending to reach credits. And there are a lot of interesting things about this run. So I started working on this basically as soon as the game came out. So in a way, this is sort of my casual playthrough. Obviously, I spoiled myself on a lot by watching other runs, learning strats from the speedrunning community, tying things together, but I definitely learned a lot along the way, and so the run evolved over the course of building things. I went back and I redid certain parts to try to make them more optimal, but for the most part, I developed things as I learned them. And so you'll see that growth over the course of the run, both in the abilities we get in-game and the things we learn. So you notice first off, we're doing these jump pogos. So it turns out that this is actually the most efficient way to move. This is very unfortunate for RTA runners because it means that they have to be jumping and pogoing constantly. But it is kind of amusing for TAS. And there's actually a lot of little micro-optimization going on here, where we're adjusting our jump height based off of changes in elevation to land perfectly and re-jump. And it's actually a little bit tricky because normally if you pogo into the ground, you actually stun for a little bit. So in order to avoid that, we actually have to hold neutral, which means no directional input when landing on the ground. And human runners are doing this as well now. But obviously TAS can do it perfectly, frame perfect every time. So we're going through the Moss Grotto here. Nothing super exciting. We're able to get a little pogo off of that guy. There's a fun little turnaround there that allows us to avoid the cling. Very little tight trick, actually. And then we're coming up to the first boss here. Oh, right. Yet another sickness cutscene. There are a lot of little weird mandatory cutscenes like this in this game. Not too many out of the first area, but it is a little unfortunate. You have to spend your time just kind of standing there. Okay, so now we've got Moss Mother. This is a pretty straightforward boss. We're going to be doing a lot of pogoing, as you'll be able to see here. She just goes up into the ceiling, and then we just keep pogoing until she's down. So, pretty straightforward boss. Much more annoying if you have to deal with it as a human and it starts giving you random patterns that make it fly across the room. But one of the advantages as a tool-assisted speedrun is that we do have a lot of control over RNG. I didn't do any injection of RNG, so I didn't make any choices about specific outcomes that I wanted. But I did manipulate RNG, which is to say, I tried different inputs, and by trying different inputs, I explored different timelines of possible ways that events could happen. And subtle things like when you attack, when you jump, can impact the way that the game plays out and the way the RNG plays out. And so by doing those things, we can adjust the RNG and then record the timeline that we like. And that's really kind of what TASing comes down to. And it is one of the areas where TAS has sort of an unfair advantage over human players. Humans have to react to RNG, whereas TAS can kind of choose the RNG path that it wants to go down. And that definitely could be a big advantage in bosses, for example. So a bunch more little jump pogos. Make our way across here, ignore all the conversations. There is a very deep and interesting story in this game, but you're not going to see any of it here. We're going to skip everything that we can. After all, it's a speedrun. Lots of little micro-optimization here, as with the other things, where we're adjusting our jump heights. Here we're going to do a little bit of a skip, And what we want is we want to pogo up to that ledge up there to skip going through a bunch of this area. And thankfully that enemy is there to help us. It's actually a little bit of a tricky pogo. Speedrunners do it as well, but it's easy to mess up. We meet Chakra, one of our favorite characters. And then we make our way over here. So this has some of the most annoying enemies in the game. These guys. They're snipers. But we are able to eventually get a pogo that goes through that. It took me a while to get that pogo to actually take out that projectile. We're going to go get Silk Spear. Here we do a quick challenge to lure this enemy, which then allows us to skip up to the Silk Spear. This is going to be our primary damage source throughout the run. Obviously we do a lot of damage with the needle as well, but this does 3 hits worth of needle damage, and so it's going to be a very efficient way to deal large amounts of damage. Now we gotta work our way over to the Bellbeast. So this fight has a cycle skip. By doing exactly enough damage so that it's not quite under half health to prevent a phase transition, we can now deal a bunch of damage on this cycle. And now it's going to do the phase transition. And if we kill it during this scream, that prevents it from going back underground and doing a long sequence with bells falling from the ceiling. This is also something that human runners are doing. But obviously, we're able to RNG manip to make sure that we get it. And now we get the Silk Heart, which is going to be useful later. Fun fact, low percent has to skip getting the Silk Heart. And so they have to do a bunch of things in the late game without having the access to that silk regeneration. But any percent gets it. Nothing too exciting about these sequences. So let me talk a little bit about our route here. So currently, we need to get to Claw next, basically. And there are a couple of ways to do that. One is to continue through here and eventually get Float, and then go up to Greymoor. But we're going to take a different path. We're going to use the Flea Caravan to get up to Greymoor. This allows us to skip Moorwing. And on this patch, which is the release patch of the game, we can also skip getting Float entirely. So that's going to save us a fair bit of time. Hi, Aira. And so we're going to take a path through here where we're going to go through Hunter's March. Now this is probably slower because we're going to have to go through a slow arena. But I didn't know that at the time. And it's kind of fun doing this these arenas with very low abilities, so. We'll also get to show you one of the features of this arena that you may or may not have encountered in your casual playthrough, depending on the order you did things in. Okay, so first we have to get through Flam. This guy's a little bit tricky without dash, at least if you can't manipulate RNG, but we're able to stay right on top of him, take care of him pretty quickly. So that isn't too long, but unfortunately the next arena is quite slow. Before we go there, we do have a Flea to save, which is why we took this route, because we can free the Flea on the way. bit of more movement through here. The pogo movement looks so goofy. And now we have this arena. This is a very long arena. There's a lot of enemies, and some of them have quite a bit of health. But because we're here so early, we get some help from Chakra. And she's actually quite helpful in this fight. But you can see that it lasts quite a while. There's a ton of enemies here. These are the last two, at least. And Chakra is going to help finish them off. There we go. So ultimately, we're going for dash here. We always want to get dash pretty early because dash is going to speed everything up. It's also going to change our movement so that we can stop doing these goofy pogos. Although ironically, the dash also has some always-on movement tech that we're going to be doing. The one on the right actually just nopes out of there, so you don't have to kill him. But the one on the left we do. Thankfully, this is a pretty short arena. There's just a couple of enemies. So once we get dash here, we're going to be able to go pretty quick. You're going to see our movement through these rooms is going to change dramatically. So what we're doing here is we're actually re-sprinting or re-dashing on the ground during sprint. And this is actually quite tricky to do because the timing needs to be just right. If you've been sprinting for too long, it won't let you dash again because you have to decelerate. But if you haven't been sprinting for long enough, then the dash is still on cooldown. So we're going for a Flea here. There's a nice little spicy cycle. We get that guy just for a little bit of silk, since we had a little bit of time while we were waiting on the cycle. And now we are going to fight Lace. I unfortunately had to redo this fight because there was a desync issue, and I wasn't able to get the lava dunk, unfortunately. But it's still a pretty quick fight. This version of Lace is extremely slow. So it's not too long of a fight. Here we're just waiting for the gate to open, which does open slightly before the camera moves. And ironically, we're not actually getting any, we don't actually need any of these bells because we're going to be taking the Flea route. And ultimately, we're going to be going through the mist. So we don't worry about any of the bells. We just happen to go through a couple of them. And we're doing this whole long trick purely to get a Flea. Which is pretty funny. The only reason we fight Lace in this run is to get access to this Flea. But unfortunately, there isn't any other Flea that's really accessible. Then we do the mandatory wait. Ooh! And now we can load back in. This takes us to the dash hard save. And now we're actually going to walk back from here. A lot of routes would pick up a bench and then take the station across, but I opted to not get any stations, and also not get any paid benches. It's debatable whether this is actually faster, because there is quite a bit of movement, but TAS is also able to do these rooms very quickly because it's very efficient, the movement. So I think it's actually pretty close as to whether this is actually faster. But we walk our way back, do this movement in reverse. And in this room, I think it's this room, there's a flea to get. Yeah, it's the next room. That ledge is very annoying. And there is a slightly faster strat in here, which I wasn't aware of at the time. So I do a slightly slower version. And now we're going to go actually travel with the fleas. A lot of dialogue here. We're losing a fair amount of time because we're in English, but it's not too bad. And of course, we will have to watch a cutscene here once we finally get to travel with them. Yeah, so a little more time lost here for this importance cutscene. But it's probably worth the time, I think. What's the point of saving frames if you aren't going to spend them on something nice, right? So now we're moving into the next part of the run, which is going to be going toward picking up Flea. Most of the tech that you'll see in here is pretty similar to what is showing up in human runs. There are a few little skips that have been discovered that I didn't incorporate at this point. But for the most part, the movement through here is pretty good. We're doing a lot of re-dashing. And a little bit of RNG manip to try to get things into good positions. We get some pogos. And we're able to move pretty quickly around. We're doing some tricks where we're actually able to dash into a ledge and get corner correction, rather than have to do a ledge climb, which does save a fair amount of time, but it's very janky, and it's very hard to replicate RTA because it's all very dependent on exact timing and positioning. So a quick little arena. A very long elevator ride. This game has a thing with liking to trap you in elevators. Probably because elevators were so broken in the previous game. We do our nice little series of bounces here. So now we're going to do Sister Splinter Skip, also known as the Garama Skip, because we Garama a lot. I did this a little bit wrong. I was running into some problems with this thing. I just did not have the patience to optimize this fully. So it does a very slow float up. And let me tell you, watching this one frame at a time, it takes forever. But now that that's done, we can make our way out here. We are going to take advantage of a little pogo here. And then we use a silk spear to open that more quickly. And now we have Claw. And from here we're going to go directly to the Widow fight, because we're also going to need the needle in. So unlike the original Hollow Knight, there isn't any tech currently involving Claw, where we could, for example, use wall cling storage. And that's perhaps a good thing. At least nobody's discovered anything like that yet. But it is still pretty handy. We get to break through all of the bells. There are so many breakable bell walls in here. Here we actually had to slow down the cycle. Originally I damage tanked that guy, and then damage take this one as well. But the problem with the double damage tank is that prevents us from doing a scream skipping here. So when I had to redo the Widow fight, I decided to get the scream skip instead. This is actually a very fun fight. I did a little bit of RNG in it, but I didn't hyper-optimize. But you can see we're doing this interesting technique where we kind of get knocked back, and then we dash forward and slash, and dash forward and slash. And those dash slashes basically allow us to reset our attack cooldown, and so we can attack more quickly than we could otherwise do so. So it made for a pretty quick fight. Go through the long memory sequence. Yeah, there are these very long sequences with these memories, and then with the cutscenes as well. Which is great, of course. We're adding a lot of interesting narrative, but it's definitely unfortunate that they're so slow for the speedrun as well. Mandatory tutorial for the Needle-In. The movement in here is actually surprisingly tight without float. And you can see that we dropped a fair bit jumping across there. So now, we're going to do some interesting things. We still have to go through a very long cutscene here. But let me talk about what's coming up next, because it's a very interesting part of the route. Ultimately, we're going to be going through the mist. And so one of the reasons you get the Needle-In is that you need it to get through the mist. And that's still true even for TAS, because it's hard-coded to not let you through without it. But we're not going to be using the Needle-In in the usual way to get through the mist. It turns out that the fastest way to get through the mist is to YOLO it and just get extremely lucky. So that's going to be fun. But first off, we have to free up the bell. We're going to do a little bit of pickup here. We have to do a save and quit here rather than wait for the bell to dull, because it's extremely slow. And this is actually faster. Even without load removal, that's faster. So before we leave this area, we are going to stop by Bellheart very briefly here, because we're going to go ahead and get a nail upgrade. It's effectively free, so it's definitely worth the time to get it. It's a pretty short detour. You can see we did a funny thing there where we actually used a nail to cancel our sprint jump. So when you do a sprint jump, you're moving at a faster X speed than normal, but normally you're locked into that jump. But if you swing your nail while you are in the middle of a sprint jump, that cancels the X motion portion of that and puts you into a regular jump, which then allows you to maneuver in the air. So that's how we got onto that ledge and then did a wall jump off of it to get up there. So just a little tiny piece of movement tech. But you're going to see a lot of places where we use the nail to interrupt motion to fine-tune our motion profiles. So like here, for example, we use some motion there, We also used a trick where you can dash while you're gripping a wall, and then if you jump out of the dash near the top of a wall, you can actually wall jump off of a higher point on the wall than you could normally reach. And so we use that a couple places. It's very niche, but when it does come up, it's quite handy to be able to start your wall jump slightly higher. Lots of little funky movement through here to get up. And you'll notice there we did a pogo through it into a dash. You get some iframes on the enemies when you pogo them, which then allows you to dash through them. And so you'll notice a lot of the time when we're going through here, we just kind of ignore the existence of enemies because we just pogo dash through them. Or we jump over them. Whatever works. So we are going to head up, but first we're going to take a detour and we're going to pick up the Barbed Bracelet. So the Barbed Bracelet gives you a little bit of a damage boost at the cost of taking double damage. So I would say for human use, this is actually a terrible deal because it's not that big of a damage boost. And it makes the game extremely dangerous, even more dangerous than it already is. We're going to do a Timothy Chalamet skip here. Thank you, Timothy. And now we're almost to the mist. A little bit of movement through here. Nothing too exciting. Alright. Time to YOLO. So, we happen to know that up is the correct exit. And we happen to know that left is the correct exit. And then it turns out that left is the correct exit again. Go figure. And then we go through this room. We're halfway there. And what do you know? Turns out left is the correct exit again. But we don't really want to keep going left, so right was now the correct exit after resetting this room. Because this is the last room, we know that it has to be right. And that was the mist. Really, I mean, all speedruns should just do that. Just get lucky, and then it goes a lot easier. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick mention here, so that we can equip the Barbed Bracelet. And now we're going to go through some very annoying cycles that I wasn't able to find a way to do much faster than humans can do. We're just locked to them. And now we do the Phantom fight. I really love the aesthetics of this fight. It's very fun. And there's some interesting stuff to know about this fight. You can actually pogo or slash these steam pillars. And so you'll notice we just slashed him. That actually did damage to him. And in particular, you can stagger him out of a phase transition. So we're now in phase 2, even though he didn't do the full set of dives. And that's the fight. Or I should say they, rather. There is some lore indicating that Phantom uses they. So the next section, this allows us to enter Act 2. Have to go through a couple of rooms here. Nothing too complicated, but we get to do some fun wall jumps. And then right now we have cross stitch that we picked up from Phantom, but we're going to go ahead and change that back for the spear. The spear actually does more damage, and I find it's a little bit easier to work with for TAS at least. I will say that cross stitch for human use is actually extremely nice because you can use it to tank hits, and that ends up being a pretty easy way to tackle some pretty difficult fights once you learn the timings and how to use it properly. But for TAS, it's able to just do a lot better using the spear. Hey there, Lace. So now we're going to make a long loop through the Citadel. Gotta grab a couple of things here. The movement in this room is kind of fun. It's a lot of vertical movement and incorporates the bells as well. So there's some interesting stuff we can do here. You can see we're doing some funny stuff with nail cancels to be able to get wall jumps rather than ledge climbs. Although sometimes we just have to get a ledge climb. We reset because it takes longer for that to rotate. And then we do a little bit of fun bouncy bounce there. Very fun cycle through here. We're able to just barely make that cycle. You can see that we're doing this jump, pogo, and then dash. Technically, this is very slightly faster than re-dashing on the ground. And so I'm going to be using that going forward for the most part. In practice, you actually want to kind of mix it in. And yeah, we're just ignoring those enemies. We just happen to time it so that we pogo through them, get the iframes, dash through. And we did that just by manipulating the timing of when we did that jump pogo cycle. So this fight goes pretty quickly. We use the screen skip. All the same types of typical strats you've seen on fights before. Using dashes to get resets, and then mixing in spears to do the real damage. That phase is kind of fun. It's actually a little unfortunate how quickly TAS finishes these phases, because you don't get to enjoy the music. It ends so quickly. And then the sad face. The poor lonely dancer. And then we save and quit here because the waiting for that room to revolve is very slow. And now we get to start doing some Cogwork Core movement. Cogwork Core has a lot of very cool stuff going on. It's a very dangerous place to be, especially on this patch because the gears do 2 damage. But there's a lot of opportunities for very cool movement. So you're going to see a very interesting drop cycle here. And we're doing this fast drop to be able to hit a tight cycle on that thing. If you're too late on that thing, you have to wait a fair bit to be able to get up there. And so that's significantly faster. So now we're going to be heading towards, ultimately, Trobbio. But before we get there, we're going to have to go through this little maze. And we're going to have to fight an arena. This is a fun arena. There's actually some interesting enemies in here. But again, the strats are pretty similar to what you've been seeing in the other fights. The main difference is that we can kind of corral enemies together to try to get efficient spears. Like that. We were able to hit the enemy behind us with the spear as well as the one in front of us. I got 2 enemies with that spear, and then both of them with that spear. So, it's all about efficiency, right? I hate the bell throwers so much. They stay so far out of the way that it's very tricky to get them. And that's that. Most of the movement through here isn't too complicated. It's mostly a lot of dash movement, a little bit of falling. But there's a lot of rooms that are just dashed straight through. There's a quill. Fun fact, you can pick that up if you haven't bought a quill from Chakra earlier. And now we do the Trobbio fight. The Trobbio fight is very flashy, but it's actually not very difficult, at least for TAS, because Trobbio is not quite as evasive as a lot of the other bosses we've fought. Like, Widow is constantly teleporting out of the way. But Trobbio we can stick to, and we can deal a lot of damage. Here we're going to stick to the side of the wall so we can dodge that firework. Very tight little trick there. And then we're just going to get a few more hits in. Pogo is Tornado, and then finish him off. And now we go through the game's longest death animation. Fun fact, the fireworks in the air there can hit you. We're not going to bother with the mirror, since TAS isn't exactly going to be healing. Obviously we reset this because it's a very slow elevator otherwise. So we make sure it's out of the way for when we come back through here later. Kind of an interesting room. There's a lot of movement just kind of falling through. And now we are on our way. There we did a skip off of that wall geometry. That does not work in later patches. They fixed that wall geometry. So in later patches you either need to have float there, or you need to do a skip with some sort of air stall combined with Reaper's Crest. And now we are going to get the Harpoon, which is a wonderful, wonderful device. Well, technically, I guess it's not a device, it's a silk skill. Or Ancestral Arc, that's what they call them. But this is going to give us so many opportunities. There is a skip that you can do when you have float, but without float you unfortunately have to go around. But it doesn't take too long. This arena is actually very fun. This is where you get a first taste of what TAS combat looks like when you have the Harpoon to work with. As you can see, it goes pretty quickly. It's just such a wonderful way to get around. The little cheeky dodge through the enemy there. So what we did is we did a pogo and dash through, and then that put us behind him. But you can't hit him on his shell when you're behind him, but you can silk spear through him. So we did a silk spear while he was turned around, and then once he turned again, we finished him off. Now we get to do a little fun movement using Harpoon. There's a couple places here where we can use it to speed things up. Very awkward room to move through. And there we get the first device. This is going to give us the first of our 3 melodies. More fun movement. I love having the Harpoon. Just combat options, there's movement options. You can see that you can actually jump through that thing well before it looks like it's open. Here we get to turn in the cylinder. Fun fact, This right here is why it is not possible to get a 0 rosary run. Because this guy gives you 200 rosaries for turning in the cylinder. Although it turns out the 0 rosary run is not that interesting anyways. This run does not pick up any rosaries other than this 200. So it was already a 0 rosary run. Originally I was hoping to do something like the 0 Geo with the swarm video, and just have the rosaries magnetizing in. But that doesn't work very well when none of the arenas drop any rosaries, because that's where most of the fun dodging came from in the 0 Geo run. It's from all the mandatory arenas. So in order to get them to drop in this game, you just have to arbitrarily fight enemies to get them to drop them, and that doesn't seem like it's very fun. Which is unfortunate, but we are going to have some other fun memes to do with this game, for sure. Stay tuned. More fun movement with the harpoon. And now we are going to do a very fun climb. Not in this room, but in the room past this one. So normally you're supposed to take these slow things around, but speedrunners have found an alternate route that uses a lot of harpoons and pogos to avoid taking those slow transporters. And this is essentially the same as the human route. There is a small deviation right here when we do a dash into a pogo. That's pretty unsafe to do as a human. Here we're going to solve this puzzle. You can see that we're doing some very precise motion here to hit things exactly the right number of times. Thankfully, this puzzle is always the same, so you just memorize it, but the movement to do it is a little bit of a pain. And that's all we needed to get the second melody. We're getting very close to the end now. These cutscenes always took the longest time to TAS, ironically, just because there's so many frames of holding down the mandolin, or the needle-in, rather. That is not too bad. So the nice thing is that this actually sets a hard save. Alright, so now we do a drop through this room. And now we are going to head our way over to the high halls. Now, if anyone has done this casually, you probably know that the high halls arena is a very spicy area. But there is some movement to get there as well, and that movement is also pretty spicy. But Harpoon allows us to move pretty efficiently through here. But it's definitely tricky. More pogo dashing to get through enemies. This part's fairly slow just because we have to wait for these things, but we have to wait for our soap to recharge there as well. Not too terrible though. Just barely hit that cycle. Humans do go for that as well. Nice little tight trick to get up there as well. Now we get to drop through here. Takes a little while, but thankfully the second set of spikes, there is a opening, which we can just fit through. Third one though, we do have to wait for as well. And now, we get to fight High Halls Arena. So, you might have already seen the earlier video I did on this. I actually had to redo the arena due to a desync, and thankfully this time I got it even a little bit faster. Unfortunately, I had a glitch that caused the music to stop working. So, trade-offs. I recommend watching the other video as well. I do more of a slow-mo breakdown of how fighting works with the harpoon here. But at high speed, you can just kind of... it speaks for itself. As people have been saying in the comments, this is lore accurate Hornet. I hate those B-bros so much. This time we were able to get the screen skip. I ran into trouble getting it last time, but this time I was able to land right in the middle of the hitbox and it gave me the screen skip. Because of course this is when you want to be on one mask, right? Seems perfectly safe. I mean, how many more waves can there be? Of course, Booter coming in late. I love the harpoon so much. The combat you can do with it is just nuts. Now, bear in mind, a lot of these strats are extremely unsafe to do as a human because you're somewhat dependent on the RNG of the enemies. If you harpoon an enemy right before it's attacking, you will just harpoon directly into the attack and get hit in the process. So, something to keep an eye out for if you decide to start incorporating some harpoon strats. Human runners are using them, and the harpoon is extremely effective. You just have to be very cognizant of the enemies and their tells to make sure that you don't harpoon yourself into a bad situation. That is a little bit harder to use if you're healing, because it consumes silk. But obviously the solution to that is just not need to heal. And now we get the last melody. So this approach, we actually have to do this drop twice, which for TAS, we can use literally the same inputs. Human runners are probably going to do that too eventually, because that is going to be more optimal than coming back from the bench down there, because it takes a while to get that bench. But for now, I think most human runners are getting the bench here, or they're walking back. The run will change as people start taking fewer and fewer safeties. This cutscene takes ages. And now we get to go up to the lace fight. The re-fight, for that matter. Thing is, we have Harpoon now. So Lace is not going to stand much of a chance, I hate to say it. And we go directly into the fight after skipping this cutscene. We actually avoid knocking her off. You notice that we harpooned above her because she was about to stagger. If she falls off the platform, she only takes 15 damage, and it wastes a ton of time because her stagger basically gets ruined. So we want to avoid that at all costs. Very different from the first Lace fight where you want to knock her into the lava. But yeah, that's the Lace fight. She's fast, but Hornet is faster. Now we need to pick up this whole cart. It's unfortunate that we need to get this because this is one of the percents and low percent that it has to get. It'd be nice if we found a way to skip this somehow. At least without glitches. With glitches, I think you can get 0% now. The full glitched run of this game is nuts. They actually... I don't think they fight any bosses, because they technically use a glitch to kill the last boss. There we go. On our way to the final fight. Have to go through the obligatory platforming section first. Nothing too difficult. Just a lot of wall jumps, a lot of dashes, a few harpoons here and there. And now we've faced Grandmother Silk. Now this is a fight where even human runners can get a lot of benefit from Harpoon strats, because unlike most of the other bosses in the game, she doesn't have collision. And so you still have to be careful of her needles, but you can basically spam, and as long as you don't get caught in that web, you can just wail on her constantly. So first phase done. Now we do get to do one fun thing here. So she always does the rock fall in the center and then on the sides. But the nice thing here is the rock fall is still going, so we were able to do a screen skip. It doesn't screen skip for a lot of time, but it's still fun to do, and as usual, TAS enjoys being on one mask here. Gets out of the rocks before they become a problem. There are a couple of really close calls with needles here. They're hard to notice because it happens very quickly, like right here. Yeah, it's snuck between those two. But that is the fight, and that is any percent. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed watching this. I had a blast making it. There's so much cool stuff going on in this game, and I'm looking forward to making additional TASes, because there's just so much stuff to explore. And I hope all of you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Thank you, everybody.